deeper than just being embraced by the Dallas community. It's for me. It's just getting adjusted here and getting established as one of the community leaders, while also, not trying to do too much. I have my own beliefs and views, and I think being here in Dallas, I've been accepted, way beyond just my talent on the court. I think it's for what I represent in the broader world and how I try to make impact and try to help a lot of different walks of life and stand on things that a lot of people wouldn't stand on. So I think that's the genuine connection I have here, and I think the fans relish in that, just being able to sometimes get to touch me when I'm going out there just to warm up or, during my shoe launch or just different things that we do within the Mavericks, philanthropic arm too. I think we do a good job of just making sure that the community feels us. They know that we're here, and, they also know what we're doing off the court. So I try to have a balance of all of those things. And when I see people in public, I make sure that they know that I'm a human being first, and please don't approach me with all the extra fandom and stuff like that, because that could make me feel uncomfortable if I'm just trying to pump gas, So you guys know exactly what I'm saying. Just I don't mind the fandom. It's just sometimes I just want to be treated like a regular human being. I don't say sometimes I want to be treated like a human being, and just how are you, how you doing, and a handshake and a picture goes a long way. I try to remember everybody's names. I introduce myself, and the little things like that make a lasting impact. So that's what I try to do here.
Welcome to Inside The Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining. If you're listening to the podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, make sure you give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, you can like and comment on the video as well, and follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. So excited for this episode of Inside the Mavs, as the Mavs are rolling right now, and I'm so excited to bring in my guest today. He is the television voice of the Dallas Mavericks, sitting at the head of the table when it comes to Mavs media. The man I like to call the phenomenal Mark Followill, joining me here on Inside the Mavs. Mark, what's going on?
Kevin, thank you so much for the lovely intro. You hit a couple of good ones there, so I appreciate that. I got it. Some people listening got it. Others may not, but that's okay. I appreciate it.
Yes.
So thank you.
We will definitely sprinkle those in. And for those who will catch them, I hope they'll point them out as we go on throughout the course of the show. But thank you so much for hanging out with me here today, as the Mavericks are right now having won 7 of 8 games. They're right now a season high 12 games above 500. Mark, give me a vibe check when it comes to these Mavericks right now and how they are playing, and for you, what you have been seeing from this team so far.
Vibes are extraordinary right now. Vibes are at a best of the season high right now. So I think the vibe check is really good. So what I really like, Kevin, about what's happening with this team right now is on the fly. And I think this is a hard thing to do, but the characteristics and the DNA of the team have changed significantly post-trade deadline. The Mavs, as you recall, won 3 games in a row right before the deadline. So you tack on those 3 wins with the 15-6 record that they have, or they're 15-6 in their last 20 games. I guess it's 12-6 now since the deadline. So 12-6 since the trades, 3 wins before that. This is a quarter of the season where the Mavs have played basketball that is on par with basically having a top 5 record in the league over that time frame, or just right on the cusp of a top 5 record. So the vibe is really good in that regard. The fact that they have been able to, again, reinvent the way they play. Prior to the trade deadline, this was a team that was very, very reliant on making threes, and that was the barometer for whether or not they stood a good chance of winning a game. And, I do think they need to get their 3-point shooting sorted out, and we can talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But I think on the positive side of things, now they can lean into defense. They can lean into paint points. They can lean into second chance points, because that was a key factor in the Denver win, for example. And so the Mavs have, if I may use a golf analogy, a few more clubs in their bag right now. They have multiple ways to win games. And in a long 82-game season, I think that's really important. A lot of games call for different ways, and no game is the same. And you're going to have to win games different ways over the course of the season if you want to be a really upper echelon team. And the Mavs are demonstrating that they can win games in a variety of different ways right now. So that's the entry point for our conversation. The vibes are really, really good because it's fun watching the team when they win, and it's especially fun watching the way this team is winning right now.
Yeah, speaking to some of that, it was looking at just some of the numbers before we got on. This team in the last 21 games, 15-6. They're number 3 in the NBA in offensive rating, number 11 in defensive rating. They've got a net rating now of a plus 6.4 over their last 21. And it's funny because, and I'm sure you felt the same, we had talked about the idea collectively that if the Mavericks offensively, they're going to be spectacular. Luka and Kyrie are going to do what they do night in and night out. But if they could find a way to just be average defensively, this could be a team that could win maybe 45 to 50 games. And what they've been doing over the last 21, they're exceeding those expectations from a defensive standpoint. And watching this team up close as you do, it feels like there's, at least recently here, a new level and sense of physicality in the way that they go about beating teams. And to your point, when shots aren't falling these days, they're still finding ways to win ball games, which I think is a sign of hopefully a maturing team as this season is going on.
Physicality was one of the things that Jay Kidd pointed out in his pregame press conference last night, because I was asking him a couple of follow-up questions about their performance against Wembanyama in the Spurs game the other night. And he shouted out PJ Washington, because I do think Washington continues to defend well, even though his shot isn't falling. He is doing very, very good work defensively, and his physicality and the way he plays good scores is something that Jason pointed out last night. But in addition to PJ's physicality, obviously you've got the physicality of the Gafford-Lively combo at center. And those guys block shots, they rebound, they protect the paint, and they just provide an imposing presence inside on both ends of the floor for the Mavs. And then I think Maxey has helped on the defensive side of the floor. He had a good game, as was part of the group of guys that played well against Wemby in San Antonio the other night. And I think that he's added something. And Derrick Jones Jr. gives you point of attack defense in the starting lineup. He had a play last night where he did get beat, but he can recover when that happens. And I think it was maybe it was Sensabaugh who got around him, Bryce Sensabaugh, I think, and then he recovered and blocked a shot out of bounds. And so, I think Jones gives you good point of attack defense. So I like this. The starting lineup changes and the way the rotation sets up now, I think have a lot to do with how well the Mavs are playing defensively and the physicality that's associated with that.
Yeah, they inserted Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup, and they're 7-1 since he's been in the starting lineup. And a guy who leads the NBA in field goal percentage is also a guy that's averaging over 2 blocks per game this year. So he's providing it on both ends of the floor. Not to mention, my man had 33 straight made field goals at one point for the Mavericks. Yeah. He has been really good for them. And I think what we're watching now is a team that it feels like can not only win different ways, but now when things aren't going well, one of the things that we've talked about also is, this team hangs their heads a little bit when shots aren't necessarily falling. That may affect them, what they're doing on the defensive end. Is this a maturing team? Is this a team that's showing a little bit more poise in dealing with adversity, but now finding ways to be better despite when things aren't necessarily going well?
Yeah, I know. I think that's a fair characterization, and I'll follow up because I kind of felt the same thing that you're feeling, Kevin. And so last night I brought up to Jason and the pregame presser. You sat here whenever things weren't going well a couple of weeks ago and pointed out again that our offense is our defense. And by that meaning a thing that has been a familiar refrain over his 2.5 years here, for the most part, is that the Mavs with an offensive oriented team tended to get down whenever their shots didn't get in, which translated to poor defense. And that isn't like a universal truth about things. That's a generality. But that is how they played by and large part over the course of the last 2.5 years. And they put that to bed for a little while. And I think that's why they made the run that they made, by the way, in the second half of the 2021-22 season and what they did in the playoffs that year. And so I brought this up to Jason last night, and I said, is it safe to say that you have changed that nature of your team? Have you evolved from being that kind of team, or are you in the process of evolving from being that kind of team that gets down and doesn't play good defense if you're having a bad night on offense? And he said, we're definitely pivoting. So I think, there's some really good signs of maturity and recognizing, again, that different games over the course of a long season call for different ways to win. And,
Sure.
you just have to be able to find a way. I mean, the whole point that he was making when this was coming up at a time when they weren't playing well is we have to learn to be a team that can find a way to win games when our shot isn't falling. Now, they clearly have pivoted to a way to make their offense still play and perform at a very high efficient level without a lot of three-point shots going in lately. But even without the three-point shots going in and without the consistency in that regard, they're still playing good defense and not getting down whenever outside shots don't fall. And I think, for example, Washington's a great example of that. PJ has not shot the ball well here. The three-point percentage and those statistics are pretty obvious out there for anybody who wants to go look at it. But the other thing that's obvious is night in, night out, and this includes against Lauri Markkanen. We're recording on Friday. This includes against Lauri Markkanen in last night's game, against Wemby in the San Antonio game, and on down the line of recent matchups where PJ is often drawing the toughest defensive assignment. And then if you go look at the matchup box score on NBA.com afterwards, he's holding his own and in many cases performing, more than just holding his own, but very, very well defensively against those high quality offensive players that he's having to match up against.
Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs. More with Mark Followill next here on Inside the Mavs. But before that, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you hanging out with me through that quick break there. And thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura with Mark Followill, television play-by-play voice of your Dallas Mavericks, joining me here on the podcast today before we went to break, talking about this team and what they've been doing really over the last 21 games. And Mark, when you look at this team and what they've got going forward here, they've got a couple of big games, of course, against Sacramento, next week as they get ready for their 5-game road trip against Utah. But I want to focus in on a couple of folks because you mentioned him a little bit already, and something that I think for Mavericks fans looking at the way that he's performed, he's been taking, as you mentioned, the toughest defensive assignments, but the three-point shooting, which hasn't necessarily been great for this team over the last 7-8 games or so. Is it concerning that PJ Washington I'm talking about, isn't necessarily knocking down threes at that rate, or is it more so finding a defined role that allows him to get more comfortable within this offense that hopefully will allow his shot to start to fall a little bit more down the stretch?
I would lean towards more the latter. And this is something that I brought up in some other opportunities to talk about it in a more of a long form situation. And this is just a theory, and by no means is this 100% foolproof, just a thought I have about it. PJ played, and the situation was what it was in Charlotte for the last 4.5 years of his career. They didn't make the playoffs. They played in the play-in tournament one time. I do think that there's an adjustment from the kind of shots that you can take in an offense on a team that doesn't have anything to speak of in the way of expectations, and the kind of shots that are going to come your way when, first of all, you're playing off two extraordinary offensive players in Luka and Kyrie, and also within a system where there's expectation and people holding each other accountable, and you're trying to win games, and move up in the standings and position yourselves for success in the playoffs. So I think there's an adjustment to that. And how that manifests itself, I don't necessarily know that, there's a way to quantify that very easily, but I do think that's a thing. How much that's influencing what's going on with him shooting the ball right now, I don't know. But I do think there's an adjustment from when you go from the kind of scenario and situation that he was in Charlotte to the one that I'm talking about here in Dallas. I do think there's an adjustment for him there. So, I said we talk about 3-point shooting, and I did want to jump in on that a little bit, Kevin, because I love that they do have new ways to win. That's really important, and that's a wonderful thing. Over the last 8 games, the Mavs are shooting around 33% on their threes. That's a number that over the course of a season would be worst in the league. So this is something to have to get sorted out. I mentioned this in a radio visit that I had earlier this week. The top 15 teams in the league in 3-point percentage this year all have a winning record. If you looked on Friday morning, March the 22nd, at the bottom 10 teams in the league, there's only one of them in the bottom 10 right now that has a winning record in 3-point percentage, and that's the Orlando Magic. Making threes at a good clip is something that is a barometer of success on the floor. Can you have a small sample size like the Mavs are right now and exploit weaknesses in other teams and win your home games, and Gafford and Lively can go crazy inside, and you can shoot over 50% from the floor as a team because you're getting so many high percentage shots inside? Yeah, you can absolutely do what the Mavs are doing right now. But for success at the highest level or higher levels, as we get towards the end of the regular season and ultimately the playoffs, that's going to have to sort itself out and get better. And it doesn't have to be best in the league. You just need to be an average to slightly above average 3-point shooting team. So they need to get back to that. And Washington's obviously one part of the equation there.
It's funny how you describe that, because before the season, we looked at this team that was going to be able to knock down a bunch of threes. And for a while, this team was knocking down a ton of threes. In fact, top 5 in the NBA, Luka Doncic, only Stephen Curry has made more 3-pointers than Luka Doncic this season in the league. And now what we've seen, with the additions of, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, a team that's been dominating inside with points in the paint, but also being a much better rebounding team. And now the 3-point shooting has kind of gone away here recently. It's now about trying to find that balance down the stretch that allows them to be able to knock down shots a little bit more better from the outside, but also not get away from the thing that's really kind of given them a little bit more of a different identity based on what they've been doing over these last 20 or so games here.
Yeah, balance is a good word for it. And, they're still taking threes, and they don't have to take, early in the year, they were taking 40 threes a game, and that number's gone way down. And there isn't necessarily a barometer between taking a lot of threes and winning, although Boston is number 1. But you can look at the bottom of the standings in terms of 3-point attempts per game. And there's a lot of good teams. Denver, New Orleans, Minnesota, for example, Phoenix, however you feel about them. I mean, that team is, right up there with the Mavs, 11 games over 500. So there's plenty of teams who are in the bottom 6 or 7 of 3-point attempts per game. It isn't about that you necessarily have to take a lot. I know that Boston's making it work with their 5-out offense and taking 42 a game, but there's a lot of teams who aren't taking a lot of threes and still very, very successful. But when you do take them, you got to hit them at a better percentage. So that's something to look for moving forward. I always like to say, Kevin, and I thought this was really important to reinforce when the Mavs won 7 in a row and then really had to lean into it when they lost 5 of 6. And I need to come back around to it here when they've won 7 out of 8. Things feel really good, and we should celebrate and have fun and talk about all the great dunks last night, and that's all cool. But you're not as good or bad as your last game. You just can't analyze a team over the course of an 82-game season like that. So there's wonderful things happening right now, but if you're in it to win at the highest level, and I remember Rick Carlisle saying this, you always have to be striving to work in your weaknesses, to not accept mediocrity in portions of the game. And if you're in it to win it in the highest levels, you'll be doing those things to constantly be making yourselves better. So great things are happening right now, but it's also okay to discuss, hey, there's some things that they do need to clean up as we move forward here and get ready for hopefully what is going to be a fun spring around here.
Yeah, it quote, doesn't matter, if you will, how you start. It's about how you finish based off of what you're trying to do as this season goes on. And for folks who watch this team, the Mavericks fans, the MFFL's passionate fan base when it comes to this team, and they look and dissect at a lot of different stuff when it comes to how this team operates on a night-to-night basis. And one of the talking points that has been discussed recently, defensively in terms of some of their closing lineups, whether it be Maxi Kleber closing, with small ball 5 lineups with PJ Washington out there, and what has been taking place with him. He went 2 of 3 against, Utah in terms of knocking down, a couple of threes. So hopefully he's starting to break out a little bit. But as you've watched this team up close, where are you in terms of how this team closes night in and night out from a defensive standpoint? And is it the best way to go about it, given some of the size that they do have with Gafford and Lively, how they may be able to mix some of that in?
Well, of course, it's on a game-to-game basis in that
Yeah.
regard. But what I want to see night in, night out is Gafford and Lively playing 40-plus minutes. And I'd have to look at the box score from last night's game, and I'll have it committed to memory. Let's see here. I had easy access to that. So what did they have last night? So Gafford played 27, Lively played 15. So those two guys played, when you add in the seconds, they played almost 43 minutes. So they're keeping up with what I wanted to see, Kevin. And I talked about this in my own podcast with Brian a couple of weeks ago. And that is start Gafford and play Gafford and Lively 40-plus minutes a game as your 5. I do understand that there's a place for 5-out offense and playing a little bit smaller. And so what I think that gives you late in late game defensive situations and late game closing situations is that group of PJ and Maxi playing with Luka and Kyrie and whatever your 5th individual is, the numbers are really good on that right now. Very good net rating, very good defensive rating, a lot of success in terms of how that lineup has performed. You can, for example, against San Antonio the other night, you can mitigate a little bit of Wembanyama's devastatingly effective defensive presence in the paint when you play a center that he has to come out and guard. You do at least. He's such a crazy good defender already, and still can play, so much free safety, for lack of a better term, and can roam and can play off people and help off people. But that's one of the things that you do at that point. Look, and they played ultra big, by the way, against Denver the other day. They played what? Gafford, PJ, and Maxi. And they needed that size, by the way, against Jokic and Gordon. So that's another thing to look at as well. So I think you've got to look at it on a game-to-game basis. But the closing lineup and playing Kleber in spot minutes with PJ at the end of games has had quite a bit of success so far. And the numbers indicate that it's a positive. It's an overall net positive when you pair those two guys with Luka and Kyrie, and then, whatever your 5th individual is going to be in a closing lineup like that, whether it's Exum, whether it's Jones, whomever it is.
And you're leading me perfectly to, the next part of our discussion, because, Luka and Kyrie, we mentioned a little bit earlier, and you heard the clip and saw the clip with Kyrie, talking about how comfortable, he is here in Dallas. And what has struck me is particularly with Kyrie, since coming back from, injury where he missed 12 games, came back on New Year's night, ironically, against Utah, but really since then has played at an extremely high level. But the comfortability between him and Luka and what they do offensively together, but more importantly for me, Kyrie Irving as veteran leader guy at this point in his stage in his career, it feels like embracing that role and understanding, look, obviously this is Luka's team, but at the same time, how to play off of him and what that means for leading other guys. It's been fascinating to watch over these last, 2.5 months, what he's been able to do and how he's put it together for this team.
I'm not surprised. And this is an observation that I had about Kyrie before he ever set foot on the floor here with the Mavericks. And that is, if you watched interactions during or after games, or before games for that matter, there is no question that along the lines of, number one, game recognizes game. And number two is guys know what kind of person Kyrie is. And, as he said in that soundbite that you played at the beginning of the podcast, he stands for something, and he stands on things that not necessarily everybody wants to stand on. He is, and this was very evident before he ever set foot in Dallas, immensely respected in the NBA community amongst players and coaches. And so I'm not the least bit surprised that Kyrie, at a couple of days away, his birthday's tomorrow, right? Is that his birthday?
I'll have to check. Yeah, I think it's
March 23rd is Kyrie's birthday. So do I have that right? Now I've got to look that up while we're talking. But here, you check that out, Kevin.
I'll check that out. Yeah.
At this stage of his life and his career and what he's been through, I'm not the least bit surprised that Kyrie has taken on this role of veteran leader, mentor for young guys. And there's so many examples I see of that being around the team. There's examples that individuals on the team talk about. Kyrie loves, I think, being in that situation of helping people grow, not only as basketball players, but as people. And he's won at the highest level, won a championship in Cleveland, as we know. Obviously, he still wants to be part of a winner at this stage of his career and sees a great opportunity to do so here with Luka. So I think you have a situation where last year they tried to make it work. It looked to me like two talented individuals doing the best that they could. But now it's gone beyond two talented individuals. And now there's a cohesion between Luka and Kyrie playing off each other, an innate sense of it's my time to go because you're not feeling it. It's your time to go because you are feeling it and you're on a heater right now. There's just, I love what I've seen from the Kyrie leadership angle, the Kyrie Luka chemistry angle. I mean, everything that's happening in that regard is a great thing. And Luka's a guy who's maturing too. I mean, he's on the upper side of 25 now after his birthday a few weeks ago himself. And so, I look, there's a whole lot more I could say about it. I don't want to like go on and on, but if there's any follow-ups you want to ask about it, we can get into it. But I think the Kyrie leadership, Kyrie chemistry with the team, with the organization, with the community, it's a wonderful thing, man.
Yeah, and he'll be 32 on March 23rd. You're right. Yeah. So Kyrie maturing and continuing to grow as he gets a little bit older. And he's been in the league for so long. It's hard to believe that it's 13 years that he's been in the NBA, but yet and still he's hit some of the biggest shots in the history of this league. Obviously, the one that he hit against the Golden State Warriors. But before I move on, I do want to ask you though, the shot that he hit against the Denver Nuggets, the running 20-foot, Kareem-esque lefty sky hook, if you will, however you want to describe it. I tell people, I said,
I describe it as one hell of a shot. That's what
that's a great way to put it. That's true. I told people like the audacity of even taking that shot or even thinking of taking a shot like that is insane to me. And even the fact that it went down, that was the part that struck me most. Is like, how in the world are you thinking of something like that in that moment, and then obviously being able to make the shot and beating Denver?
But when you're a great offensive player and you have complete control and command and knowledge of your own game, like I don't think Kyrie is catching the inbounds pass and thinking I'm going to have to go to a lefty hook shot. It's in the blink of an eye because his basketball IQ and his knowledge of his own game is just such the highest level possible. The comprehension that he has of his own game. I think he just realizes in that situation, okay, I've got to switch. I don't have much time. Jokic is guarding this pretty well because I think that's one thing that hasn't been talked about a whole lot is Nikola Jokic guarded that damn thing pretty well, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he got switched onto him, which is what they wanted, but then he completely took away any thought of going right. And so Jokic defends him in such a way where it's like, okay, I can't go back to my right hand. So it's going to have to be the left. And where I am on the floor and the amount of time remaining, this is the shot that I've got to take. And I think all of that, there's audacity to it, but I think all of that happens in the blink of an eye because you're trying to get a shot off before the buzzer sounds, before the time runs out. And the whole thing happens in 2.8 seconds, I think was the time when they threw the ball in bounds. And so it's all in the blink of an eye. And like I said, I think the reason that a guy like Kyrie Irving is able to do that is because, as I said on the broadcast last night, I saw him in a sweatshirt the other day that said, mastering your craft is a journey. And he is still on the journey. I think he'd be the first to say he's still mastering his craft. From the perspective of the rest of us mere mortals, he seems to me like he's mastered his craft. And so when you have that just incredible depth of knowledge about your own game and your own strengths and your own body and what you can do in those 2.8 seconds, then I don't know how much it is audacity or it's just, this is what I can do, and this is what I've got to do, and the time that I have to work with, and he's able to make it happen.
Yeah, one of the best buzzer beaters you'll ever see in the history of this league. God, just incredible
it was
stuff.
Incredible, man. Incredible, and a lot of great body control on that because the feet were awfully close to going out of bounds. And I saw Sean Elliott in San Antonio on Tuesday, and I tell Sean this. Sean and I are good friends, and I tell him that, I have just so much respect for Sean and, what he's gone through in his life and his NBA career and things he stands for. And he said, I'd always like to tell him, anytime I see a player who has a situation where his toes are inbounds, but his heel is or getting close to hovering over the line, I always reference that because that's one of the most amazing examples of a guy with his toes inbounds and his heels up off the ground and over the sideline. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, go check out the Memorial Day Miracle when Sean hit a game-winning 3 in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals against Portland back in 1999. And Kyrie he wasn't quite in Sean Elliott territory, but one of those feet got really close to the heel, maybe almost hovering over the sideline. But that's just one more element of what an amazing, extraordinary buzzer beater that was the other day. Sad I didn't get to call it, but happy as hell, man. I got to watch it. It was a bomb-ass shot, man.
Every now and then you deserve a day off. As hard as you work, every now and then you deserve a day off.
Just like bomb-ass hemp beat and bomb-ass shot. That's what that was the other day.
Yeah, for sure. Last couple of things before we get out of here today. Obviously, as we wind down the stretch of the season, Luka Doncic has played at an MVP-like level. He's going to be first team All-NBA for an absurd 5th year in a row. I'm safe to say I think that's going to happen. And at the same time, folks are looking around like, man, maybe walk with me for a quick second. If they don't lose 5 of 6, I think we're legitimately having him top 2 and maybe not 2 as far as the MVP of this league. Where are you in terms of not just the season that he's had, but the MVP credentials that he has that could maybe get him to that point this season? Because I feel like, I'm not going to lie to you, I feel like Nikola Jokic right now is the leader in the clubhouse for the league MVP once again. But Luka has had just a phenomenal season for the Mavericks this year.
He's having one of the best individual seasons in NBA history. And there are numbers to back that up. And I wasn't, I don't have all my numbers researched in front of me right now, but generally speaking, in the play-by-play era since 1996, when you look at points scored and the points you create off assist, he's going to set the modern record for points created per game in a season. In the modern, points, rebounds, and assists combined in a season, he's going to have more than Westbrook, or at least probably is going to have more than what Westbrook had in his first season, averaging a triple-double and winning the MVP back in 2016-17 with the Thunder. So just from a statistical standpoint, Luka's having an extraordinary season. Poised to be the first Maverick to ever win the scoring title, over 34 points a game. We'll see if he keeps that 34-point average. It did take a little bit of a hit the other night, and it's down to 34.1 now. But, what's the difference between 2 or 3 tenths of whether it's 33.8 or 34.1 or whatever? The precedent has been set and shown that you can win an MVP when you are a high 40s win team. And in the case of Westbrook with the Thunder and Jokic winning when he won his second MVP with the Nuggets back in, I guess it was 2021-22, they were a 6th seed. The Mavs are at 41 wins right now, Kevin. They got 12 games to play. 47 is, at this point, I think we'd say we'd be a little bit disappointed if they only won 47 games, if you're at 41 with 12 games to play. So you're going to have a chance to be at 48, 49, 50. I think Jokic won 48, the Thunder won 47, and the Nuggets won 48. Those years that Westbrook and Jokic won the MVP. So, I think that there's precedent there for a player winning MVP, having an extremely historic individual season and that level of team success going along. It doesn't have to be the best team in the league or one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the league. So I hope people see it that way before it's all said and done. I think, I do believe that we have to look at individual success, but also have a good, happy medium of taking into account what your individual performance means for winning. And I believe that in the games that Luka has played this year, I think that, let's see, how many games? Looking at my notes. So 61 games, I think they're 38 and 23. I believe they're 38 and 23 whenever Luka plays this year. So those numbers give you a little bit more perspective on how much he influences winning. And you take away, the games he's missed, the games that Kyrie has missed. And I think it's hard to have nuanced discussions in this world that we live in, but I think that if you really take the time to look at the numbers and what the Mavericks have played like and how much they've won whenever Luka has played, I think there's a really, really strong argument for MVP. And obviously Shea's had a great year and Jokic is having a great year. But to me, when you look at the historic nature of the statistics and then deep dive and really have a true understanding of how much of an impact he is having on winning and team success in the games he's played, and team success, by the way, in the games that Luka and Kyrie have played together. I believe they're 27 and 15 now in those particular situations. So, he's an MVP guy to me.
Yeah.
What I'm worried about, Kevin, is this, and I mentioned this, on one of my own podcasts recently as well. I used to vote, and team broadcasters used to have a vote in these awards. The league went away from that because they don't like the fact that a team broadcaster might vote for his own guy, because now awards impact the percentage of the cap that you can make as a max salary guy for contract extensions. I do understand that. I took my votes more seriously than that. It wasn't just going to vote for somebody to help them make more bank, even if they were somebody that were on the Mavericks or whatever team. And I think most of my fellow play-by-play guys take it that way as well. So it's a little frustrating not to be involved in the process anymore, because one of the things I always did is you get these reminders when you vote. You start getting reminders a week ahead of time that, your vote, your ballots are due the day after the season at 3:00 Eastern time. And I think, there's almost like this encouragement of, hey, don't put it off until the last minute. Make sure you get your votes done and get them in on time, and something doesn't happen the last day and you all of a sudden can't get your vote in. However, I do think it's really important to wait and see how these things play out. I mean, you can't bake in your thoughts and your narratives too early on this stuff. And here we are at 70 games, and look at how much the narrative has changed with the Mavs.
Yeah.
And the team performance, and they bumped up another spot in the standings last night, and they've got, by no means is sixth. They're going to have to work their asses off to get sixth place, but even fifth is maybe a long shot possibility. We'll see what happens with the Pelicans and the Brandon Ingram situation. So that's one of the things, man. I hope that that's just not where we are, and that is that everybody's opinions are just baked in and not malleable at this point about where we are with Luka and the Mavs. And there's still 3 important weeks left in the season. I think about that year Jokic won the MVP, or that Westbrook won the MVP. He had some huge games down the stretch, and that was supposedly swaying voters. I think about Joel Embiid last year, and I think he had 54 points in a final week of the season game against Boston that everybody thought, okay, man, this is the thing that now he's over the line. He's got the MVP. So I hope that everybody is realizing that, hey, man, this season is not over. There's a lot more games to play, and there's still a chance to take in information and, make the right decisions about votes based on that. So I hope that those that vote are going to approach it that way. But I'm out of that thing right now, so I don't know.
No, that's tremendous perspective. And like you said, the nuance and looking at it with a little bit deeper dive just shows you just the impact that he's had on this team when it comes to winning. And for me, that's always been one of the biggest criteria is how do you impact winning, whether you're on the floor, and what's the impact when you're not on the floor based on what your team does from a team success standpoint. And Luka's case is as strong, if not the strongest in the league, based off of what his team has done with him and when he's not been on the floor. And it's funny, I just tweeted out, the Mavericks are a Luka Doncic missed hamstring game away from being on an 8-game run, because I think they beat Oklahoma City if he's on the floor the way that the Mavs competed that particular night. So, that's just tremendous perspective on how this thing goes. And the narrative.
Do we air on the Freak, Kevin, the podcast, or is it just on audio or audio and video? It's not actually on the Freak, right?
Right, it's just audio and video.
Okay. So I can say I took my shit seriously when it came to voting.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't want to say that on the Freak and they have to dump it or something like that. But
no, you're good to go. You're good to go.
No, when it came to the voting thing, I just, maybe I sound a little petty and a little bitter about it not being involved in it, but I took my shit seriously with that regard, and it was an honor to be part of it. And I do think that you have to have the right mindset and approach. Not to say that my mindset and approach is the only right way, but I do think that there's value in making sure you don't bake in your thoughts and your narratives too early on how you feel about this or anything. For that, I mean, it's not just this award, not just MVP, but I've had discussions, arguments with Damaris, and I feel like that he's dismissing Chet Holmgren too much as Rookie of the Year because of Chet's impacts on winning with the Thunder. And Victor's got great numbers, but I mean, the Spurs are not even going to win 20 games probably. And I do think we have to look at that a little bit. But Wemby's numbers have just continued to get so much better and better, and his defensive prowess already is so next level that it's like, hey, I'll admit I'm kind of changing my mind on that as we evolve here towards the end of the year. So I think it's just important to have an open mind about these things.
Yeah, he's legitimately in the
For sure.
defensive player of the year discussion, which I mean, he's gonna be a problem for the next 15 years. Like, I'm trying not to think about it, but Wemby gonna be a problem for the next 15 years in this league based on what he's doing. Last question for you before I let you go. Where is this team going? 13 games left in the regular season. Season high 12 games above 500. I should say 12 games.
Well, yeah,
left
41-29.
Yeah,
That was game number 70 last night.
Yeah, that's right. So 12 games and a big stretch coming up. 5-game road trip, longest, post All-Star break, and 2 massive ones against Sacramento. What does this team have to do to get in position to make sure that they secure their spot in the top 6 by the time it gets to this season's end?
Oh, man. This is going to be a hard road trip, dude. This is a tough trip. Utah is going to be a pain in the ass game to play. 2 at Sacramento are obviously going to be tough. Sacramento, man, I don't know what to make out of them. They are so Jekyll and Hyde. They run.
Sabonis has been fantastic for them. He's been a triple-double machine for them this season.
He's great. And their highs running Milwaukee off the floor, beating the Lakers pretty handily last week. They've had a lot of other really impressive wins. Denver, Phoenix, Clippers. They've had a lot of good wins in the second half of the season. And then they've also blown a 22-point lead at home to Chicago and lost to Detroit and lost to Washington. I mean, they are a weird team, man. I don't know what to make of that. But I do know that it's really hard to go into somebody else's barn and beat them twice in a row. If you just split next week, the good news is they don't gain any ground relative to you. But, of course, the problem is, one, you don't gain any ground relative to them either. And then you lose the tiebreaker. You would lose the season series 3-1. But I'm trying to be realistic, and so I'm kind of just hoping for a split next week. Obviously, if you won both and gained 2 games and then put yourself in position to have the tiebreaker, because their conference record, they'd be tied on head-to-head, and their conference record would be too close to call for the end of the season at this point. You just have to let the other 2 weeks of the season play out. But I think, if you can get through there with a split next week, I think that would be good. And the Mavs have, based on strength of schedule, an easier run in to the end of the season than Sacramento does. But then you're counting on help from other people and what Sacramento team is going to show up from night to night. So the Houston game is going to be tough. They're on a 7-game winning streak right now. That might have snuck up on people, but they're almost back to 500. They're 34-35.
True. Yeah.
The Golden State game is going to be tough when they go out there. And then you're going to come home and have to play the Warriors again a few days later on the second night of a back-to-back. You still have to go play at Miami before the year is over with. You got to go play at Oklahoma City on the last game of the year. Maybe they won't need it. Maybe they're going to be playing for the number 1 seed. Who knows, man? I feel like 48 wins would get you to 7th. I think 48,
which is bananas, by the way, that 48 wins will get you to 7th and you still be in the play-in. That's crazy.
But the Mavericks won 49 in 2013-14. And played San Antonio in the first round as the 8th seed. And by the way, played San Antonio better than anybody else did that year in the playoffs. But the Mavs were a 49-win team that were the 8th seed. And there have been years in the past, in my time with the Mavs and watching the Western Conference, where 50 wins got you the 8th seed in the West. I mean, that has happened on a couple of occasions. It's crazy, but that has happened. So, I think, look, the schedule analysis is for me to do. The guys on the floor have to go out and, obvious man analysis here. They're not worrying about all those other games and all the scoreboard watching. Go out and continue to play your best game and get better in the areas you need to get better and continue to show this ability to win games different ways. And hopefully it will all sort itself out. But this is a really tough road trip, and some of the home games afterwards are difficult. And hopefully if this thing reaches 48, 49 wins at the end of the year, at a minimum, they would be in the most advantageous play-in spot. But hopefully, 48, 49 is 6. And if you get to 49 or 50, maybe 5 is in the equation. Depends on the games you win, of course, because division record's the tiebreaker for the Pelicans and Mavs because they split 2-2. And that's still up in the air with the Mavericks having 2 games to play against the Houston Rockets. So those games take on, added importance because of that. So it's a lot to be sorted out, man. A lot still hanging in the balance. And that makes every game important, which is why everybody needs to either listen to you and Coop on the Freak, or if you're in front of the TV, watch me and Harp and Devin and Skin and Dana and Leslie and the whole gang and Brian on either if we're on Bally Sports Southwest or on WFAA Channel 8.
Well, like any Bryan Danielson match, this was an absolute banger. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Mark, tell the folks so they can find you what you got going on, man.
Well, number one, thanks for the comparison to the American Dragon. Much love in that regard. People watching see my Blackpool Combat Club sweatshirt on today. M Followill on the Twitter. Mark.Followill, I'm sorry, is my Instagram. So that's my road, food, running pictures and social life pictures and things like that. So no, man, we're looking forward to getting to do. I think we have 10 of the last 12 games on our broadcast. Of those 10, 4 on Bally, 6 on WFAA, and the statewide Dallas Mavericks broadcast network. And we'll do the first round of the playoffs. And then, of course, there's no more local broadcasts. And that's when I encourage everyone to definitely listen to you and Coop on the Mavs radio broadcast. So I'm trying to manifest the Mavs getting out of the first round and onto the second round, Kevin.
Well, I appreciate you putting your boy over, and it's been a tremendous, ride so far this year, and hopefully there's more to come as the rest of the season goes on. So I appreciate
you stuck that in there. Put your boy over. So that's
that's right.
Yeah. Some people know what we're talking about.
That's right. They'll pick it up. For sure. Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, KG. Take care.
That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you to Mark Followill, television play-by-play voice for your Dallas Mavericks, for joining me on this episode today. Make sure you download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. You can like and comment on the video and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. I'll be back on Monday recapping a weekend of Mavericks news, if there is any. And, of course, the Mavericks get ready to take on the Utah Jazz on Monday. Until then, I'll talk to you later. Peace.